Hi everyone, welcome back to the garden. We're now in early November, the weather unseasonably mild, and in fact the forecast the next 2 weeks looks good as well, no frost at all. So plenty of time left to enjoy your garden in its full autumn splendour, or at the very least put off your overwintering plans for another fortnight at least and not have to worry about the inevitable divorce when you bring all your plants inside. But today, I've just got enough time to talk about some overwintering tips for Begonia Luxurians, one of my favourite begonias, but unfortunately a tender one, that needs a little bit of TLC to help it come through the winter months. So I hope these vague tips help you with yours and hopefully get an even bigger and better plant next year. Let's get started. Maybe not looking its best right now, but this is my Begonia Luxurians. A beautiful plant. Mine in this relatively small pot has reached 1.5 meters, around 5.5 foot this summer, but planted out in the ground or moved to a larger pot with a little bit of feed and more watering, I've no doubt it'll be over 2 meters tall. And in fact, these beautiful exotic foliage plants can reach 2.5 meters, 8 foot tall here in the UK. Absolutely stunning palmate leaves, beautiful red colouring in summer, and mine has been flowering pretty much non-stop over the sun months too. A lovely plant with so much for the garden, and one of the most impressive begonias you can grow. But these are a tender plant, so need a little bit of care to get them through winter. Whilst the Begonia Luxurians then, it's definitely classed as a tender plant, there's different degrees of tenderness. And unlike say a coleus, which if it gets close to around 5 degrees or any kind of frost, that's it, it's completely gone. These begonias seem to be made of slightly tougher stuff. And in fact, a lot of people seem to say they can take around 5 degrees, maybe lower for short periods without a problem at all. And in fact, in October, during that one frosty night that we had, this begonia, the pot, just got moved to closer to the house, literally just 1 meter from the back door, where the frost I knew wouldn't get to it. It survived perfectly fine. It drooped a little bit, but then the next day came back no problem at all. So in fact, these are a plant that you want to leave outside for as long as possible before the first real hard frost, or maybe in a few weeks' time when the daytime temperatures start to get below 10 degrees and you know basically you're living on borrowed time. So this is a begonia which can take a bit of cold, and I believe they can probably take a frost and come back from it, but potentially not here in North Lincolnshire. So for me, it's a plant I have to bring inside. Now, recently I listened to the podcast Plants, People, Places by Philip Oostenbrink. I'll put a link to it in the description below. He had an episode or an interview with Mike Clifford. Mike, obviously an expert at growing a multitude of exotic plants, and he said that he'd struggled to get this plant overwintered inside his house. Struggled for a few years until he tried them in essentially an unheated carport next to his house, which just stays above freezing. So really, that is the optimal conditions for this plant. If you've got somewhere bright, frost-free, and with a decent level of humidity, this plant will come through winter just fine. But unfortunately, most of us can't afford to have a heated greenhouse. We don't all have the luxury of a bright, frost-free place without it being inside our houses. That's certainly where I am. I have a heater in the polytunnel, but I only use it for those nights when it really is going sub-zero. So it's definitely not completely frost-free. So for me at least, this plant, particularly whilst it's in a pot, has to come inside the house. But that isn't a kind of condition they like. These begonias appreciate humidity, they appreciate the moisture in the air, which unfortunately central heated houses don't give them. So if you have got a frost-free area like a carport next to your house, maybe a very bright garage, or ideally a greenhouse or polytunnel, that is the perfect place to keep it. But for me, inside is the only option. So what do I do to keep this plant alive? Well, the secret really is a little bit of watering regularly and often. Unlike the Insetti, which you definitely want to keep on the dry side, this is a plant which just needs that humidity and needs the moisture, otherwise it starts to go very, very crispy. And in fact, it's starting to droop a little bit now because I haven't watered it outside for the last couple of weeks, which really is a testament to how dry it's actually been for the last fortnight. Amazing, I know. So this is a plant which definitely shows you very quickly if it isn't happy. And it's definitely a tricky plant in terms of achieving the right balance between watering and not watering. If it gets too dry, the leaves start to droop like this. And if it gets too wet during winter, then you'll start to maybe see a bit of root rot affecting how it holds its leaves as well. So really, I would recommend little and often when it comes to watering. maybe every couple of weeks or so. Let the top bit of compost get dry before you start to water it, or at least monitor it off the leaves. Now, it will look rough over winter, I can guarantee that. The leaves will start to brown a little bit, it's just inevitable. But one thing you can do to reduce that is at very least give it a little bit of a misting every now and again to help keep that sort of local humidity up. And definitely, under no circumstances, leave it right next to a radiator, because that'll finish it off in no time at all. So basically, summarised, you need to keep this plant somewhere frost-free and ideally as bright as possible. If you've got a frost-free greenhouse polytunnel, that's perfect. If you have to bring it inside, definitely choose somewhere cooler, brighter, like a conservatory perhaps, and certainly keep it away from any radiator or heat source that will dry it to a frazzle. And when you do start to see the leaves brown off a bit, don't worry, because it is inevitable that the plant will end up browning over winter, but just use that as an opportunity to give it a bit of a misting, and hopefully you can keep it stumbling through winter. I know mine never look great by the end of March time, early April, but they're alive and that's all that counts. And then at that point, you can chop it back a bit if you need, and they usually vigorously sprout away again. You can also take cuttings this begonia very easily. It certainly seems to root quite quickly in my experience, and it's just literally a case of choosing a stem like that, chopping below a node, removing most of the foliage, definitely the largest leaves to reduce transpiration. And if you've got a hydropod or something like that, absolutely perfect, it'll root very quickly. I don't have one of those, so I just literally went for putting it in a vase of water, and if you can, put a plastic clear bag over the top to help keep that humidity in. Maybe a bit of rooting powder mixed in with the water just to speed things up. I found this to be a very good method of getting a backup plant. Or at the minute, I've noticed that Craig over at Grow Paradise, he's got a sale on, and he's got some of these begonias in plug plants at around £4. So definitely worth a try if you want to pick up a end of season bargain, look after it like a houseplant over winter, and you can have something like this in your garden next year. So very simply, these are a tender plant that needs to be brought inside. So if you bought one this year, it's out in your border currently, I would certainly think about digging it up and moving it into a pot. And then when it's inside, choose somewhere that's bright and ideally not too hot. A cool conservatory would be ideal. And definitely, if you start to see the leaves browning, it's a good indicator that you need to improve the humidity around the plant. Misting is really good. Put it on a tray with some gravel and water can also help, but definitely don't be tempted to overwater it, because it'll do more harm than good. So hopefully this quick little rambling video has helped you with yours. If you found any other methods of getting these amazing foliage plants through winter, please let me know in the comments below. And coming up next week, more overwintering videos on some of the plants I grow here in my tropical style garden, which are still thriving in the beautiful autumnal air. So thank you for watching, leave your questions below, and I'll see you next time. See you later.